Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Right. Students have joined or joining?
I don't.
Most of them has joined. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. I think let us get started, and people can keep joining more. That's fine. So today, I have come up with some research and some notes on certain topics, which I think few of the franchises and students have kind of shared, right? So we'll see, how do we kind of discuss all of them. I think the topics are one around waste managing waste management using new technologies. The other is using 3D in the healthcare sector. And then there was another topic that was requested, that how AI and IoT technology in industries is solving the problems in various sectors. So the above two examples, if we start discussing, that's nothing but the application of AI and IoT as well. So everything will get covered together in those kind of examples, right? So I don't have any slides or presentations, but what I will do is from my notes, whatever I have been able to kind of gather, I will discuss those points. You can always note it down. You can copy and you can keep it, right? And of course, as we speak, there is going to be questions and there's going to be thoughts and an exchange of ideas that is going to be shared, and then you can kind of make further notes on that as well, right? So that's how we'll go about it. So first one, I'll talk about let's say overcoming the urban waste management in India. How are you exploring the new technologies? So we'll do it in two parts. One is we'll talk about the current challenges and what are the processes that typically is kind of done in these kind of situations. And then I will talk about very specifically, there are 3 to 4 cities in India who are doing it very well. And I'll give you examples of what they are doing and how they are doing. Right. So I think this will help you to kind of understand better. Right. So firstly, if you are talking about the current state and the current challenges in urban waste management in India, I think the biggest problem is rapid urbanization and population growth. I think that's the biggest challenge we have right now. So no matter a lot of times when the government, we kind of take the relevant measures, because of the urbanization and the growth in population, a lot of times it becomes very difficult to manage that, compared to many other countries. For example, Singapore, if you see, um, it's a smaller country. It's probably the entire country is maybe the size of Bangalore, right? So it is easy for them to create an infrastructure and create an ecosystem which is helpful. But in our country, we have always had that challenge. So hence it is even more important that in our country, every city or within the city, the various north, south, east, west, right? And of course the councillors, the local bodies, the government, they all work hand in hand together to ensure an ecosystem is kind of built. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges what we face right now, right? Inadequate the waste collection and disposal infrastructure, right? So that's another part. While urbanization is one part of it, the inadequacy of how will you collect waste, where will you collect waste, and how will you dispose becomes a big challenge in India. Some cities, they are doing it pretty well, but again, I think overall there is a lot of improvement for a growth over here, right? Then lack of awareness and education on waste management. Now, this is a very specialized kind of a system, right? So if you go abroad, you will see that waste management is actually a science. It's actually a science that one needs to learn. The it's not just random. There is a method to it. There's a science attached with it. How you dispose your waste. What kind of waste it is? Is it a dry waste? Is it a wet waste? Is it a paper, or is it some food items? Or there are multiple such waste management kind of segregation is what you are doing, right? So unless one understands the science behind it, it is difficult to kind of understand how do you do that. So this is a challenge in an urban, in India, in an urban, areas as well. That not a lot of people are aware of how waste management, etc., is kind of done, right? And of course, health and environmental hazards. I think that's also a huge current challenge in India. Of course, in the last 5 years and 10 years, there has been a lot of drive towards cleanliness. There is a lot of drive towards ensuring there is a hygiene, but there's a long way to go, right? So even if you go to the districts and the villages, there is still a lot of those infrastructural development that needs to happen in terms of the hygiene and how do you segregate and manage waste, etc. So there's a long way to go as well. Of course, this is a process that has started, but again, this is a current challenge for sure, right? um, then the second part of the challenge is how would you typically do a waste segregation and collection, right? uh, Understanding the importance of waste segregation at source. So a lot of times, what we do is we dump everything together, and that's not the right way to kind of segregate the waste collection at the source, because not all kind of wastes are similar in nature, right? So plastic is a different kind. Your food items are a different kind. Your wet waste, right, is a different kind. So there are a lot of dry waste, that's a different kind. So there are various kinds of waste, and each one of them has a role to play. And hence it is very important to segregate them at the source itself. So a lot of times what's happening right now is in the many apartments in the cities, in the apartment and the larger societies, what they are doing is they are creating a waste collection at the source. They're asking the citizens and the residents who are kind of staying there to segregate the source at the very beginning itself, and in different collection boxes. And then the official, I mean, basically you go and kind of put it in the larger, so which the the municipal corporations and everybody comes and kind of takes it away, right? So this is an awareness drive that has started, but again, this needs to be really followed through. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges we see in our country, right? uh, the other concept is, which is gaining a lot of popularity, is what we call as the 3R approach. 3Rs: reduce, reuse, recycle, right? So a very important aspect, if you're collecting the source, if you're collecting the waste and segregating at the source, how are you going to be reusing them and recycling them? Can you recycle the plastic? Can you create compost out of your waste, which will kind of bring in the renewable energy, etc. So I think that's important as well, so that it's a cycle that kind of follows, and education around that cycle is kind of very important, right? um, Encouraging community participation. We talked about the apartments and the community. So I think the more awareness that you create and encourage the community, I think that's going to be critical, right? Uh, Even how the systems of collecting the waste, right? Whether you have the waste collection bins, or whether you have different dust bins across, spread across the multiple locations. I think those things are also very important in terms of the hygiene. A lot of times, we just throw things away, and it kind of it's basically littering and creating a dirt in the city, right? So one of government's very key initiatives has been in fact, I'm sure all of you have heard about Swachh Bharat. The Swachh Bharat is nothing but actually managing the waste management in a more efficient manner. Of course, again, in a lot of cities, in a lot of towns, this has kind of started and people are doing well. But India is such a vast country that in the entire country, if this has to be taken, then this has to be taken in a very large scale. But what we all can contribute at our end is where we are staying in our community, in our society. We as individuals, if we start kind of following these practices, the others will automatically kind of start following it, right? And then of course, this entire movement of cleanliness or waste segregation, etc., will start. So I think we also have a role to play. It's not only about technology, but it's also about how we behaviorally do this. I think that's important as well, right? And then of course, coming to the different advanced technologies that is available. While one is the behavioral aspect we all need to kind of adopt, the second is how do we then use technology to treat the waste management, right? One example of, and there are a few examples, and I'll just go one by one. So one example is what is known as the anaerobic digestion, which means converting organic waste into biogas and fertilizer. That's one of the ways in which you can use technology to kind of do that. The second is waste to energy plants. So basically generating electricity from solid waste, right? How you kind of really generate the power. That's another kind of technology which can be used, and there's a potential in our country, right? Then there is another third thing which is called as pyrolysis and gasification, right? Which means converting waste into valuable products like syngas and biochar, right? And the fourth one is plasma gasification, where in a high temperature you convert waste into synthetic gas, gas and inert slag, right? So I think these are few important areas of technology, and I will kind of put them in the Zoom chat so that you can see, and you can probably make a note of it as well, right? I've just kind of mentioned these. So these are the ones which through a technology point of view is how what you can do. And in India there's a lot of scope for this, because it is very nascent. So I think if any one of you wants to kind of study more about this, or take up more in detail conversations around this, I think there are a lot of relevant materials that is available online, and you should be kind of looking into it. But then I think these are the highly recommended technological treatment. It's called as waste treatment technologies, and what you can kind of typically do with the waste, right? The other very common and popular way of kind of managing waste is, it's called decentralized composting, right? Uh, so typically, creating the composting units helps to manage wastes better, utilizing your waste for composting and vermicomposting, and typically decentralized composting, it reduces transportation costs and generates nutrient rich soil amendments, right? So in a lot of these societies or the apartments, composting is kind of encouraged, where you kind of really use the waste and use technology to kind of create compost. And compost can be used across it's used as fertilizers, it's used as minerals. But the important point is how you are regenerating and recycling the waste in order to kind of sustain that. I think that's important in terms of technology, right? So creating these kind of units in your society and apartments becomes important, and technology kind of helps kind of do that, right? um, then there are some smart technologies, in addition to what I kind of mentioned in the chat, and also pasted in the Zoom chat. There's some other smart technologies for waste management as well. So there are a lot of things like smart bins and waste container with fill level sensors. So the smart bins typically has sensors attached with it. So the moment there's a certain level of waste collection happens, the sensor is going to kind of give a blink, and that this is kind of full. So you then take it, replace it again, and this cycle kind of continues, right? Um, you have a lot of IoT based waste monitoring and tracking systems. So typically, in the larger plants or in the cities, where these new technologies are being implemented, they run various IoT based sensors, and it's all connected. So you will sit in the centralized room, and you will know that this section of the city, or this section of the part of the town, etc., where you are collecting large garbage and bins, and you're segregating things, etc., is all getting automated, and stuff like that, right? So these are few of the things which is important and can be used, right? And of course, I think what is very important is how government initiatives and policies are also supporting this, right? And I talked about Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. I think smart cities, the other initiative is smart cities, right? Typically policies around public private partnerships and waste management, right? Like all the cities have the municipal corporations. So how does the municipal corporations work along with the private operators and the government? I think those are important as well, right? So I think these are few of the very top level situations in the country. And just for you to understand that what are the different areas of waste management, before we actually get into the examples of how each a few of the cities which who are doing that, right? Yeah, so before I go to the very specific examples, and there are 3 to 4 cities, and I'll talk about how these cities are doing the actual work. While one thing is understanding the theory, and the second is actually putting in the work. I just wanted to check if anyone has any questions around overall waste management, or anybody would want to share any examples that is happening in their city or their town, just for all of us to know, and also discuss, probably, right? If anybody has any thoughts or questions around it. Or any examples which you are seeing that's being followed, and you would want to share that knowledge with all of us. In your society, or in your city, or in your town, or any projects which you have worked on with any NGO or anything. Any examples from all of you in terms of managing this waste thing? No? Okay. If there are no examples, then let's talk about few of the examples, and the cities in the country who are doing this, right? Um, the first, in fact, there are 3 cities, and I'll give you an example of the 3 cities in India who are doing this. One is Indore, the other is Surat, and the third actually is actually from Karnataka, that is Mysuru, right? So these are 3 cities which are doing different waste management, and they are trying to implement the latest technologies, etc., which is going to actually help them do that, right? So we'll go over it one by one. So let's talk about Indore first, right? And then those of you who don't know, Indore is one of the largest cities in the state of Madhya Pradesh, right? And it has been recognized for its innovative waste management practices by the government, and also at the United Nations as well, right? So what they are doing is they started a city-wise implementation where there is a door-to-door waste collection system with GPS-enabled trucks to ensure efficient waste collections, right? So typically, as you know, that every city or every town, the municipality has the waste collection process. What Indore has done is they have enabled the trucks with GPS, because a lot of times while the trucks would be collecting the waste, but then they would probably not be following the right process of going to a particular part in the city or dumping it or taking it to a waste management plant, etc. GPS actually enables to track and monitor how this is being done, whether the waste is being collected, whether the waste is being dumped, whether the waste is being taken to the right plant, etc. Right? So that's a technology led thing that the city has done. um, Indore has also established what they call as a biomethanation plant. So this typically means they have established a plant where they will convert the organic waste into biogas, which is then utilized for generating electricity and cooking gas, right? So I think that's a huge invention or innovation in terms of technology, because from the waste you can actually convert this into a biogas which can be used as a fuel. So if anybody here is a chemistry student, and if even if you have studied chemistry, you will know that organic waste can be converted into a different format, and this is nothing but a gas format, which can then be further utilized for generating electricity and also cooking gas. So imagine how waste management is then helping us create renewable energy and helping us to sustain further, right? So that's something like the city of Indore, they have done. They have also introduced mechanical sweeping machines and road vacuum cleaners for effective cleaning of streets and public spaces. Now, this is something which is also popular in many other cities as well. A lot of good cities, they actually utilize them. They use mechanized format. There are sweeping machines. You have the different trucks, and you have the different the sweepers attached with the trucks, and as the truck moves, you are vacuuming and cleaning the streets as well, right? But Indore has done it very well in the public spaces, etc., right? The other thing is something which I noticed when I traveled abroad, and I have not noticed that in India yet, but I'm sure it is going to be coming sometime soon, is they have mechanized trucks, etc., which actually sprinkles water in the night, and then the cleaning happens simultaneously. While in India we do a lot of vacuuming and it's more of the dry a cleaning, in the abroad countries, they actually do cleaning of the entire streets by sprinkling water, etc. There's the big trucks which goes and sprinkles water, and then there's a follow up which starts cleaning them, right? So that's another way in which you can actually clean your cities and manage your wastes better, right? So just wanted to share that example. I see something in chat. uh yeah, I think Chandrakant has mentioned here in the chat that segregation of waste as dry waste and biodegradable waste, home level itself. Yes, true. We talked about it. So it all starts in our home, and then of course the collection of societies and everybody, when we are doing this even further, the initiatives take steam, right? The same thing, the example of Indore, what we talked about right now, it is nothing but collection of the wastes from the home and the localities, and taking it to the plant to create that biodegradable demethanation, and creating that biogas, which ultimately becomes your energy source, right? So it all starts from there, right? Any other thoughts on this example of Indore, in terms of creating the biomethanation or the organic waste, and the mechanical sweeping machines, etc.? I think these are a few things of example before we move on to the next example. Any other thoughts on similar nature?
Hello, sir. This is L2 Tahir Mirji
Yes,
from
yes,
KTC
yes,
Hubli.
yes.
Yeah, in Hubli, as we are a smart city,
Hmm.
our smart city concept has created a concept of tracking the vehicle, as you said.
Yeah.
Along with that, to granularize the tracking,
Hmm.
they also have implemented the RFID tags on each houses. whenever they goes by the houses, they actually have to touch those with their handheld devices with those tags. Unless and until they do that, their tracking will not be happening. So
Right.
that is how it's one step ahead of what you're saying has already been done in Hubli. So,
Perfect, perfect. No, that's a great example. And I have not visited Hubli, so I don't know how the 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 societies are. Are there apartments or is it more like individual houses? I'm just curious to understand how it is structured. What's the kind of localities you have?
uh, it's a individual houses, sir. Almost
Okay,
80% individual houses you can consider, as we have around 9 lakh population in Hubli,
okay, okay,
around 8 to 8.5 lakh in Dharwad.
okay,
So we have most of them individual houses.
okay. And you are saying each individual houses has this RFID.
Exactly, sir. And they
Okay,
have the serial number allocated to each of them.
okay. That is fantastic. That is a great example. I think I'm sure we should be talking more about it, because I think this is, as you correctly said, this is like taking it to the next level, right? So so what happens is, when a certain city in the country takes certain initiatives, then it reaches to the others and through the news, etc. And then they started. I'm sure Indore was the first one to implement something. I'm sure they would be learning, from the Hubli example, and then, this can be implemented as well, right? So, thank you, Thai, for sharing this information. I think this is really helpful. I wasn't aware of the advanced, concept in Hubli, and hence I asked this question, how are the houses, and if each house has this RFID and this kind of tracking, then this is brilliant. I think this is lovely to see, right? So, thank you for sharing. Any other such examples from anybody else? Okay. If not, let's move on to the second one. And this is actually an example of Karnataka, that is Mysuru, right? Um, and I think Mysuru is known for its sustainable waste management initiatives. I think over the years, there are various initiatives that's been done, right? The other factor, I think we are here all from Karnataka, I think we all should feel very proud about Karnataka. Is I think in the country, Karnataka is one of the most technologically advanced, cities. Sorry, the state, right? Not only in terms of Bangalore, but I think I think it's there across all the districts and all the other cities as well. So, and Mysuru has always been known for various sustainable waste management and initiatives. But what is really popularly known is the city implemented a very comprehensive waste segregation program. You know, and I think one of the first examples in our country where source was segregated. I mean, sorry, waste was segregated at the source is actually from Mysore. While a lot of other cities are right now adopting it, but this one of the earliest example in our country was where the Mysore local body, they encouraged citizens to segregate waste at the source. So I don't know if right now in the group there are folks from Mysore who has joined, and maybe if you have, you can probably share more examples of it as to how the initiative, etc., was taken. But this is a very well-known example, in the country, right? um, Mysuru adopted decentralized composting units where organic waste is converted into compost and utilized for horticulture and agriculture. That is another example of how Mysuru adopted this, the decentralization of composting, right? The city also installed many biogas plants to convert organic waste into biogas, which is used for cooking and generating electricity, right? And last but not the least, Mysuru introduced mobile applications to track waste collection, enabling efficient route optimization, right? So again, quite advanced in terms of how things were managed, from a very early stage as well, right? And Mysuru's example is always taken at a national level too. Like when you travel to different parts of the country, and when you're talking about adoption of technology, the smart city, etc., I think Mysore's example is also kind of taken many times, and this is one such example out of the many. And I'm sure in the future, much more, many more different technological innovations will start coming in Mysuru, Hubli, Dharwad, I think, and then a lot of all the other districts in Karnataka as well. And I think we are seeing very good momentum in adoption of technology, right? I think the very fact that in this class we all are here and actually talking about real life example, this is a proof. This is a proof and a testimony to how we in Karnataka we are actually thinking of adopting this technology, wanting to do something new, wanting to do something which is innovative. And I think it all, as I said, starts from us, right? So this itself is a biggest example of the mindset shift and the change. But I think it's great to kind of see examples of Karnataka also being talked about at the national level, right? I see there's a message from Kavita Computers to everyone. It says plastic waste. India has been incorporating plastic waste such as plastic bags and bottles into road construction. Very good example. Yes, the waste plastic is shredded and mixed with hot bitumen, correct, to create a polymer PMB binder. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think very good example that you have quoted. It is true. I think one of the biggest projects that India started to take up, I think a decade back or something like that, is exactly this. How can we use plastic waste to convert into something which is used in road construction? And in the last 10 years, in the whole country, everywhere there has been a huge boost towards infrastructure and creating roads, right? National highways and state highways and etc., especially national highways, right? So I think this is something which has been used and adopted quite a bit. How the plastic waste is shredded and mixed, and it was mixed with bitumen to create that PMB binder, and that's been used in the national highways, right? So I'll give you a very recent example of one of the highways that was created, I think in Uttar Pradesh and UP. And you all know that our Union Home Minister Nitin Gadkari is somebody who is very passionate about building roads and infrastructure, right? So he decided that there was a new inauguration that was supposed to happen. So he decided that he would personally go for that new road inauguration, and he sat in the car and with the IS officer and who the government officials were, and he asked for a glass of water. I will like to drink water when I'm kind of in the car. So the officials, they gave him the glass of water, and then Nitin Gadkari said, "Okay, now drive with a minimum of 80 kilometers per hour, and if not more, on this road, and I'll keep the water here. If any drop of water actually spills out of the glass and falls in the car, then I'm not going to be inaugurating this road, because that means the smoothness is not correct," right? So that's the level of dedication that our government and our folks are also kind of doing in terms of building the infrastructure of the country. And one of the very key technologies, as you mentioned, is using the plastic waste, because typically when this is mixed with hot bitumen to create that PMB binder, while one, it helps to bind, that is sure, it also gives that smoothness and the texture as well to the roads, right? So it's a very important aspect of how you can typically utilize this for your quality construction. And at the same time, this helps you to manage your costs better as well, because any renewable energy is always cost saving, right? So it has multiple such kind of benefits. So I think thanks for sharing that information. Is there anybody from Mysuru who is present here and who might want to talk a little bit more about the initiatives, just to share with the rest of the teams as well, or anybody who also has additional knowledge about Mysuru and would like to kind of share? If not, we'll go on to the next example of another city, right? Um, who is also kind of, has made national headlines in terms of waste management, and that is Surat in Gujarat, right? Um, it has, over the years, it has made some really significant strides in kind of, waste management, right? The city established a waste to energy plant where solid waste is processed to generate electricity. Again, pretty much similar, like, in terms of biogas and plants, etc. So Surat's also kind of done something similar. They implemented a bioremediation process to treat organic waste, reducing the volume of waste sent to the landfills, right? So that was one thing which they did. Then the city also introduced an underground waste collection system. Now, this was something new, which they were kind of trying out, right? Where minimizing the visual impact of waste bins and improving cleanliness. So the way they kind of did that was like they created various underground waste collection system where you didn't have to see the waste getting collected in the bins, because typically that's what we visually see, right? And sometimes we know that, okay, there's a waste bin that is kind of taken. So and visually, it may not be appealing at some point in time. So Surat even went to one step further in kind of introducing a waste collection system, which was more, everything was starting to get collected in a underground fashion, right? And from there, the system actually took the waste to the plants, and they got treated, and the organic was converted into the energy, etc., right? So this helped to minimize the visual impact of seeing bins, but then the same process was kind of happening. Surat also launched a mobile application for citizens to report waste related issues and track the status of their complaints, right? um, Again, simple process, but an effective process, as long as the municipal and the citizens are kind of working hand in hand, right? So typically from this mobile application, every citizen in the city, every house in the city, they could just kind of use that app to notify the municipal or the bodies and talk about waste management, and then they would track it, just like you raising a complaint, and then you have a kind of a tracking mechanism to see if your problem and the queries were resolved. So similarly, this was done. So imagine, when we have a problem with an Airtel or a Tata Sky or something like that, we actually call the customer centers, right, to help solve the problems. So in this case, it was about waste management. So if I am seeing that, near my house there is a dump and it is not getting clean, or there's a challenge of waste management, I can kind of log in the details and use that app to kind of share that information and track the status as to whether the municipal corporation is actually coming and doing it or not, right? So that was one thing which Surat did very effectively, and they're still doing it now. I've heard people saying in Surat, speaking that it's really working well, is what they're saying, right? So yes, so I think these are few of the examples of the actual implementation of waste management, and how kind of you are using technology to kind of do that, right? So I'll probably pause for a moment here and then see if anyone has any further questions, etc., or any thoughts or examples they can share from whatever we have kind of learned. Is there any projects that any of the students have done around this, or anything that would also be good to kind of share this information and their experience? Would be nice to hear. Or even in your workplace, or any kind of projects you have done, your schools and colleges have kind of encouraged you to kind of do something. So if you would like to share something. Anybody else? And this question was originally this topic was originally requested by Kavita Computer. So thank you for recommending this topic. I think this is good. So do you, Kavita Computers, have anything else to kind of share around this? Is there anything that Kavita Computers would like to share with us?
They haven't no to 3D printers.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
3D printers.
Okay. All right. Okay. Is there something else? KTC Hubli, I think you're saying something?
So in our school days, through this program, it was like running parallel to NCC, NSS. In NSS, the students used to go to villages. They around some 50 or 60 students used to go to villages and on their own, they used to start cleaning the village. So looking for students, then villagers volunteered with the students to clean their village. So this was the impact on the villagers. Seeing somebody else coming from outside and cleaning the villagers who were ignoring the issues, they understood the issues, become aware of the issues which normally they were ignoring. Then they jumped upon and they started with the students. They also started cleaning their own village. So this was which we have seen.
Right. No, that's true. And of course, like, I think different schools and colleges, they actually encourage these kind of activities, right? I think in the past, like, a lot of these schools and even in the present also, they kind of, do and participate. But I think what's most important also to understand is, like, maybe in the past we did not have so much of technological advancement, but now we do. Hence, I think while we take this voluntary, like, examples, or like, all the school students, they kind of, taking this up. I think it's also very important to work very closely and hand in hand with the local civic bodies and the government as well, in terms of how would you typically want to implement, like, using technology as well, right? I think that's important. Like, for example, in Hubli, I think as Tahir mentioned, that the RFID, I think that's a very good example of, like, how things are done as a part of the smart city concept, right? So similarly, the question is, like, can other cities adopt it, or can other cities kind of, learn from such examples, right? Also, like, typically, like, we talked about Indore and Surat as examples in the larger, like, scheme of India, and I'm sure there are many other cities. We just talked about 3 examples, but, like, I'm sure every state, every like, a city would have something, like, which we can kind of, adopt. The question would be, like, how quickly can we adopt, and then how quickly can we actually really take this implementation to actually do is important. Because in India, I think this is one of the big opportunities of how you can use technology to actually drive this waste management. And I think it's a big project, like, right? And there's a lot of, like, there's a long way to go in terms of, like, how we can really scale this to the country level. And I think that's really important to understand. So yes, so even in terms of, I think the various career opportunities, like, if one is wanting to implement something of the technology that you're learning into an area which is to do with, like, waste management or renewable energy, as they call it in the industry, it's called the energy sector. Then I think this is something which is a good option as well, like, from a career point and growth point of view as well, or job opportunities, like, I think that this is going to come up very soon.
Sir.
Yep.
Sir, I have an idea, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, corporation are daily collecting the wastage from houses, sir. So we collect, government will collect the wastage like organic and vegetable wastage.
Yeah.
By the use of these, they will create one plant, that is a biogas plant. From that, they will create a gas, sir.
Right.
And sell it to the people.
Right.
That will give the job creation, as well as it will economic also it will grow, sir.
Yes. Yeah. No, very true, and lot of, you're absolutely correct. So a lot of corporations are already encouraging this and doing this as well. The question is like, how we all as citizens, we are also able to kind of, bring forth these ideas and also see like, how things are done. There's a lot of amount of education that is required, awareness creation that is required. I think that there is a role that, we can play for sure. And then there is, of course, like, adoption of like the technology to kind of, do that, right? So I think it's a combination of both, but absolutely right idea, because these are the things that we need to kind of, really bring forth and like think of like, what we would want to do as the next level. So yes, it's a good idea. Right, any more thoughts? Anybody else? Examples, anything else? Okay, I see a chat here. Kavita Computers is saying, yeah, so Kavita Computers is saying, was talking about the plastic waste, and then we talked about it. And they have also mentioned that, like, as a metro city, it is possible to solve this kind of problem, but whereas in 2-tier and 3-tier cities, how do we manage this problem? I actually think it is probably easier to manage in a tier 2 and a tier 3 city because of the less population. While yes, in metro, typically, like, the infrastructure is bigger, there is more investment, there is more technology coming, etc. But actually, if you see, the tier 2 and the tier 3 cities is where the chances of success is much higher, because you're all starting from scratch. So metros in our country are all more or less messed up. Name any metro, right? Somebody may be like, a little better than the other, but in general, because of the population, they're struggling to kind of, really look at things where this waste management is going to be a possibility. Even forget about any other state or any other cities. Like, think of Bangalore itself as a metro, right? The waste management system in Bangalore is not something that anybody should be proud of, to be very honest. And people who are staying in Bangalore, like myself and a lot of others, every day we face these challenges. Of course, there are like, initiatives that is being taken, like, source segregation, etc. But still, there is a huge challenge that the city is facing in terms of doing this, right? Because of the sheer volume of population, they're not able to kind of manage. But think of, like, the example, like, of a Hubli that, you mentioned over there. Like, earlier in the class. Or for example, like, even for that matter, like, any other, like, cities in the state, you actually have a better chance of kind of, implementing this because of the lesser population compared to a metro. And also, if you are able to create that awareness, you are able to kind of, create that proper, like, an operations process, I think the chances of seeing a success is going to be much more, right? Having said that, however, I think it is also very important that, like, the focus on tier 2 and tier 3 cities should, the investment, the technology, all those things, like, the government also has to kind of, work very closely with the local people, with all of us, right? Like, who stay in that city, and then who would want to kind of, create those local civic bodies and kind of, work and take it up. But if you ask me honestly, I think if you want to see success, I think tier 2, tier 3 cities, chances are you will see success much more faster, and you will see, like, easy and quick success too, because, like, you are able to build something from the scratch, is what I feel. Whereas the metros are already extremely, like, overpopulated, and there are a lot of challenges, other challenges as well. It'll happen slowly, but then, like, the existing challenges exist, right? Yeah, but good point. It's a good point.
Thank you, Sandy.
Okay. All right. So the next topic, for today, what was requested is, it's about using technologies in the healthcare sector, and specifically the 3D technologies um, that can be used in the healthcare sector, right? Um, so we can talk a little bit more about that, and then hear examples of, like, how certain companies are using it, certain medical institutes are kind of using it, etc. Right? So there are few ways in which 3D technologies can be used and is actually being used in India in the healthcare sector, right? We'll take an example of India itself because I think that will be more relevant. So one is the medical education part of it. That is, 3D printing is being used to create anatomical models that can be used to teach medical students about anatomy and physiology, right? And I think this is a huge step forward. So as a medical student, the more real examples that you get while you are kind of while you are a student, while you are studying, while you're doing the practicals and labs, etc., will help the person to understand things better. With 3D technology, if you are able to create the human anatomy, right, whether it's the your entire human body or a specific portion such as the brain or anything, heart for that matter, it is very easy for a student to visualize that the entire way in how a human body kind of works, right? So I think in the education sector, using 3D as a technology is really, really kind of making that impact, right? So that's a starting point of how a 3D technology can actually improve. While we do a lot of implementation, etc., but I think we need to start from the scratch, and the first step is our future students who are kind of learning medicine, who are kind of learning more about healthcare, needs to understand from the very beginning as to how the human body works itself, and only then they would be able to solve further and further problems to help. Because ultimately what is the goal of a healthcare? The goal of a healthcare industry is to make lives better for the humans. So humans are we all are the prime the main target for the healthcare industry, right? So that our lives are better, we get cured of our diseases better, right? And our problems get solved faster. So I think starting point is that education, and I think 3D as a technology is really helping to do that. What these models do is these models can be more interactive and engaging than your traditional textbooks, right? They can be also be customized to some specific patient cases. So for example, earlier, when you would just read, of course, any medicine student would be reading volumes of books, right? That is more text and theory. But no matter how much you learn in theory, unless you start applying in practical, it becomes difficult. And in applying in practical means who will you apply on? You will not get real human bodies to kind of apply your skills. But then before that you need to really practice and understand better. So 3D technology and 3D printing, right, can actually create very specific use cases also. So for example, let's say one wants to specialize in heart surgery, right? And wants to be a heart specialist, cardiac specialist, which means this person is to really understand A to Z of the entire way in which the hearts function, which are the organs which are obviously related, what are the arteries, what are the valves, where does the blood flow from, right, etc., etc., etc. So if you're with 3D, you're able to do that mock, that live demonstration, or that live mock, even when you are a student and even before you start kind of practicing. I think that's a huge kind of help and a boost, right? Versus just studying in let's say for example a book or a textbook. So I think that's one of the biggest impact of your 3D printing or 3D technology in a medical education. So medical education is one of the areas, right? Second is the surgical planning, the actual surgery that is supposed to kind of happen, and how does 3D actually help there, right? In terms of the advancement of technology. So what happens is, like, 3D printing is primarily now being used to create surgical planning models that can help surgeons visualize complex procedures before even they operate. These models can help surgeons to identify potential risks and develop more precise surgical plans, right? So earlier, what would happen is, like, based on the doctor's knowledge and, like, how the patient is, the doctor would be taking a certain approach and a process, right? And of course, like, while ultimately it's the human, and, like, the doctors, based on their experience and medical proficiency, would be doing what they need to do. But with 3D technology, what's happening is the doctor can now feed in the patient's information and the problems in the system, and the 3D will then kind of create an output which will show the doctor exactly as good as a real life example as to where the problems are or how things should be done. So even before your operation, the actual surgery or the operation, the doctor or the team of doctors can actually look into the problems in a much more closer way, figure out as to how do you do it, because it's then during the real time they know exactly, like, how and where they should be kind of doing it, right? So it's become really that important, and critical as to, like, how this 3D can be used, like, even before the surgery, to kind of do that, even during surgery. So typically, like, robotic surgery is something, like, which is kind of gaining momentum. That also uses 3D as a technology, like, while the doctor puts in the input, right, and then, like, sees everything on a screen, and you just program it, and you program the robot in such a way that the robot actually kind of goes in and does the operation, which is much more precise, because at the end of the day, a human hand can shiver, and it's manual, but a robot with this program can actually kind of do it much better, and the doctor is actually sitting and kind of doing the operations from, like, behind, right? So that's another way in, like, which the 3D and the robotics, etc., is actually being used in the medical science, and it is becoming very popular. Of course, like, in India, not all the cities offer you that, but right now, majorly, lot of the cities, they have started to kind of adopt this quite a bit. And I think Bangalore, of course, is, like, one of the biggest like, advocacies of, like, 3D and robotics. Even the other like, metros as well, like, you have, like, the good hospitals, they kind of have these kind of technology advancement, and I'm very sure in the coming years, or, like, etc., even the tier 2, tier 3 cities will start having this, because I think this is the next generation of, like, boom in the economy. Like, how would you use like, your 3D technology to really kind of do it in the healthcare, right? So yeah, so I think, yeah, Tahir kind of mentions in the in the chat, the Da Vinci surgical robot, right? So yes, that's one example. And even like, otherwise as well, other than that as well, there are a lot of these like, robots which are being used. For example, they are being used very commonly in your knee replacement surgery right now. So you go to any advanced like, hospitals and or medical facilities in the country, and knee replacement has become really very like, easy nowadays, right? Even 10 years, 15 years back, it was not, but now knee replacement is almost, I think, every household has some like, use cases of knee replacement, etc., right? So robotics is actually being used a lot in knee replacement surgery, because it's a very easy surgery, right? Robotics is also kind of, now started to kind of, being used for a lot of cancer treatment. So recently in Bangalore, there is the hospital called Fortis, right? So Fortis right now uses robotics as to treat patients with cancer. Recently, and this is an example which I can share personally. So recently, a few months back, one of the person whom I know, in the family, there was a patient, who had to be treated for, your colon cancer, and it was a little critical because colon is a important part of our system. So they went to Fortis, and the doctor actually used robotics to treat this. It's been 5 months now, and the patient is kind of doing well and recovering. And the doctor was saying that had it been few years back, we may not have been able to kind of save the patient because our treatment was not that well advanced. But now, because of technology, we were able to pinpoint exactly how we would do the operation, what is going to be the recovery period, what is going to be the procedure like, how many days we need to plan for this, what is the next step. So all this planning can happen in a very systematic manner, right? So I think that is one of the biggest examples of how things are being used. And that's where 3D is coming in the picture. So I think this is a real example which I wanted to share with you, right? The other use case is of 3D is custom implants and prostheses. I think that's really important. When you have certain implants made, or you need to use certain prostheses, wherein those are the extensions of your body or the body parts which needs to be given a medical treatment, right? 3D printing is used to create custom implants and processes that are specifically designed for the individual patients. This can help to improve the fit and function of these devices, and it can also reduce the risk of complications, right? So earlier, while the implants and the processes were being used, it may not have been that accurate from a person to person, right? Because we all are different human beings at the end of the day. So everybody has a different requirement. And that could lead to a lot of complications, because not every human body would take the the elements in the in the right way, in the sense that body may not be able to respond to that external devices in the right manner, because there could be some complications. But what's happening with 3D is and this is also a big jump and an impact in the industry, is 3D is able to design exactly what you need. So if your body requires a certain implant which is very much suitable for your body, given your function and given how your body is operating, 3D printing is actually able to provide that recommendation, and based on which, if the implants and processes are created, then it becomes much more easier for the medical practitioners to have that conducted on the human body, so that's important. So that's what another huge use case of 3D in the healthcare, right? The fourth one is in terms of the drug delivery, how you are actually delivering the drug. The 3D printing is used to create custom drug delivery devices that can deliver drugs more effectively and efficiently. This can be especially helpful for patients with medical complex conditions, right? So typically when you administer the drug, and there are different ways in which the doctors would do that, right? Depending on the situation, there could be some complications that comes in as to in terms of the administration of it, because again, maybe a certain part of your body or certain elements might not be responding well, right? So what 3D printing does is it gives you again see, ultimately 3D printing is nothing but it gives you the entire anatomy of the body in a very detailed and granular manner. So this would also help the doctors to administer the drugs in that specific area, or in part of the circulation in a much more efficient manner, right? One example could be a lot of times we use doctors, they use catheter, like, for patients, like, who has a kidney challenge or something like that, right? Now, typically, a lot of times while you are trying to kind of, use that in the body, the doctor may find complications as to where to kind of use it, because maybe the veins are not showing up properly, or maybe, like, that portion, like, where that prick needs to happen from the machine, there is some sort of a complication. And from an external point of view, we are not able to actually figure out, like, how it is. Doctors are not able to. But if you're doing a 3D kind of printing of your entire, like, body, then you will know, okay, if the veins are not coming on the left, it might come on the right, or if it's not coming on the top, it can come in the center. And that's exactly, like, where the doctor is then going to make that incision, correct? So it's going to be as, like, precise as possible. So then it becomes easy to kind of administer the drugs, right? So this is also being very commonly used in most of the advanced, like, hospitals nowadays, in most of the cities. And I think, again, once again, like, I think Bangalore, in Karnataka, is actually leading the way in terms of these new adoption of new technologies, right? And of course, there are some other, like, really high end, like, medical institutes in the country, like, for example, AIMS in Delhi. There are some lot of other, like, multinational hospitals, like, which are kind of coming up in India, etc. In different cities, they are also kind of using this, but the adoption is kind of going up quite a bit, right? I think that's something, like, is important to kind of keep in mind. So if you're thinking of the usefulness of technology in the healthcare sector, then this is something which becomes very important to keep in mind, right? Like, and how 3D is being used to administer drugs, right? The last one in this example would be, tissue engineering, correct? So 3D printing is actually used to create scaffolds, right? That can be used to grow new tissues and organs. This is a promising area of research and could eventually lead to new treatments of a variety of diseases. So this is still being used a lot as a part of the research. So what this typically does is, like, 3D engineering, 3D printing will help you to understand that in your body, if there is a certain area where there's a possibility of, like, the tissues can be grown. I think that's where, like, the tissue generation, like, not the degeneration, but the generation of tissues is going to be kind of helpful. Of course, this is a very new area, and there is still a lot of research going on. We don't have an exact answer as to how and when and what, but this is a interesting area that, like, could be a future wherein, like, this kind of 3D, like, a tissue engineering can be done, yeah, based on the 3D printing, right? So overall, the use of 3D technology in the Indian health sector is still very early, right? But it is growing very rapidly. As I said, like, a lot of the cities are kind of, really leading the way in terms of the adoption. I think as the technology continues to develop, we can expect to see more innovative applications of 3D printing in healthcare in the years to come, right? While 3D printing itself is a huge, has been a very huge innovation, and the application in the healthcare can be very wide. I think this is something, like, which can be really used in healthcare to quite an extent. But yes, there is a lot of scope. There is a lot of adoption that needs to be done, like, in all the technology companies, or all the, like, the medical, like, fraternities, they start need to kind of adopting this, etc. So the huge potential, again, very huge potential, but like, it's for the years to come as to how we kind of adopt and implement, right? um so that's there about, like, the 3D. And there are some companies in India that are using 3D technologies in healthcare. And if you want to know which of these companies are, of course there are many, but then I can talk about, like, a few which are really, like, well known. One is, like, Anatomize 3D MedTech. This company provides significant patient specific solutions for the healthcare industry, right? By using 3D printing, your rapid prototyping, bioprinting, etc. Then there is a company called 3D Incredible. This company specializes in design and manufacture of 3D printed medical devices, including implants and prostheses. And there is another company called 3D Heals. This company provides 3D printing services to the healthcare industry, including medical education, surgical planning, and custom implants, right? So I will share this information in the chat so that, like, you can do more research as well. And yeah, you can see, you can do more research on these companies and see, like, how they're kind of doing it. Of course, there are many other companies as well who are kind of doing this as well, right? So, but yes, but I think it's important to understand, like, what's happening here, right? So I'll pause, and I'll love to hear some thoughts or, like, questions or anything that you may want to share around 3D and impact. And this question was again, like, given by Kavita Computers as well. And I think KTC Hubli had mentioned, like, how to implement AI and IoT. So all the examples we talked about are ultimately going to be using AI and IoT only, right? All this 3D and like, the waste management, etc. It's all managed by, it's all application of AI and IoT at the same point in time. And it's only going to be much more, the robotics, right? So it's all about AI. So any thoughts, questions? Is anybody here in the group looking to looking for some career options in healthcare as well? Is that something, like, which you're also kind of looking at? And if there is any questions around that, maybe? Like, there's a lot of scope in the healthcare industry, so, and is growing. Anything at all? Okay, so if there isn't anything else, what else, like, would like to kind of discuss? Because we had these 2 topics for today, and 3 topics for today, and we have kind of covered them. So is there anything else, like, you have questions for me? Like, I'll be happy to kind of answer. Any thoughts, questions, or anything in general around implementation of technology, or the particular sectors or the careers, those kind of things. Any questions, any thoughts, or anything that you would want to know more about? Okay, if we don't have anything, then I think we can probably end the class a little earlier today. Or is there any other questions?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
Sir, how can we use 3D technology in gaming industry, tourism, gaming industry,
Gaming industry. Okay.
advertisement, and defense sector?
Okay. All right. Okay. That's a good question, right? So let me do something. We talked about generative AI a few days back as well, right? Like, how to use, like, Google Bard or Chat GPT, etc. So let's see, let's put in this input in a generative AI and see what kind of answers do we get, right? I think it will be an application of both the things together as well. You will get your answer. At the same time, you will see, like, how to use such tools to get these answers, right? So let me share my screen, and then we'll do this together. All right. So let's say I'm using ChatGPT as my as my tool, right? So your question was how to use 3D in a gaming industry, right? So let's see. I have to give my input to ChatGPT. So I will tell, I would like to know how 3D technology can be used in the gaming industry. What else would you like to know in the gaming industry, right? How can we use 3D technology in defense sector? I would like to know that as well. What were the other questions? Anything else? Am I missing something?
No, sir.
Okay, let's see what kind of results do we get. So after I input this, I say go, and chat is trying to come up with some sort of answers. Looks like it's a tough question. Okay, it's coming now. You see how the answers are kind of coming through? It's all giving you all the different options. Then it's talking about let's use how 3D technology is used in defense center. See, you have the entire answer now. Now let's go on the top. It talks about 3D technology has revolutionized the gaming industry by enhancing the immersive experience of the players, right? So how can the immersive experience be useful? So one is like the graphics, one is the virtual reality, one is the augmented reality, then how would you use a game physics and simulation, using 3D technology? So as simple as putting in an input in a generative AI tool will give you all these answers. Now, what you need to do here is you can't be copy pasting the same. What you'll have to do is you have to go further and do further research, right? Virtual reality, yes, it depends heavily on 3D technology to create an immersive environment, right? What you can say more is because you have to customize this, you can say, please share with me real examples of virtual reality games that uses 3D technology and is popular, right? It'll give you some. It'll start giving you an examples over here. Certainly, it says there are a few popular virtual reality games using 3D technology. What are all of these, right? There are plenty of these things that can kind of come through, correct? Then what you will do as an answer is whenever somebody is asking a question or whenever you are doing a research or whenever you are kind of creating a presentation, you will say virtual reality, why it is a very important use case in 3D. And then you will say, as an example, maybe like, this is one of the games, right? Perhaps like, if all of these games are not very familiar, you can also say like, please share an example of some Indian games or Indian, etc., right? Which can be more useful. So anything that in your chats, any kind of, input that you put in the tool is going to be helpful for generating this, correct? Similarly, like, it also talks about, let's see how 3D can be used in a defense sector. Training simulations, virtual prototyping, simulational awareness, etc. So all of these can be used in the defense sector. So then you can say, okay, fine, I understand what the training simulations are. The defense sector will often use to create a realistic training simulations. The simulations can be used in battlefield scenarios, aircraft, vehicle operations. You want to say, for example, know more about battlefield scenarios or an aircraft. Then you can put in the input over there saying, please share examples of training simulations in defense sector for battlefield scenarios, because you want to know a little bit more about how 3D can be used in a battlefield scenario. So you put in that input and we'll start seeing coming in. So these are the various examples, right? You have a virtual battle space, comprehensive military training simulation platform, right? Then you have like, dismounted soldier training system. Then you have a close combat tactical training. You have joint fires. You have close support simulator. So you can keep on getting more and more and more. As long as from all the information that you're getting, you are picking and choosing exactly what is required for you. And that is the way to use your generative AI to get answers. So the idea is like, always remember that the idea is not to kind of copy and paste of what you're getting. The idea is to keep on doing research and more and more and more. Like, you can get as personal and as more detailed as possible and start picking those. Like, you can open up a separate Word doc. You can start picking up and putting things over there, putting things over there. Once you have done your enough research, you have everything, then you prepare your own answer, collecting information, what is more relevant. That's going to be more authentic, right? That's the power of using like, generative AI and actually answering all your questions. So was that helpful?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Try this out. Try out this like, generative AI tool, right? So ChatGPT is one. The other is Google's Bard, bard.google.com. Both are pretty same and similar, but you can try out like, both the tools and see like, what kind of results you get. Maybe you get certain interesting results in one and you get some other interesting results in B, and you can combine the two together, and then you can have your own like, answers. So even if like, you want to make your PowerPoint presentation or something, ChatGPT will not give you a PowerPoint, a PPT, because it's chat only, it's only text, right? But what it will give you is, it will give you the pointers, which you can take and put it in a PowerPoint, and then you can explain further. That's another way of like, how you would want to do your presentations, right? Lot of times, like, we tend to like, struggle in terms of how should we present. I think ChatGPT can help you. Google Bard can help you. It will give you those pointers. It will also give you what should you articulate. The articulation is right in front of like, you you can practice that, and in the presentations you can talk. This also helps you not to struggle during presentation. So these are techniques you can try.
Sir,
Yeah.
sir, we have a chat GPT, sir.
Yeah.
Give the answer in text format. But we are doing a project, sir. Step is there, sir. Like that chat GPT, sir.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Sir, we create a project, sir. Now,
Yeah.
we have any similar to chat GPT, sir.
Okay.
It will give all the information about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. See, ChatGPT and Google Bard are the two examples. There are multiple, tools that is present, or in the future, more such tools will come up. But the idea is the same. This is nothing but over the years, machine learning and AI has worked together to ensure that the user query, what we are putting into the tool, they're able to match and give me the relevant information. So this is a big use case of a AI and a machine learning. But the important thing is, how do we take and apply? That will be important.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? If not, we can end our class today a little earlier. Okay, if there's no questions, then I think we can kind of end our class today. Harinakshi ma'am, are you there?
No, sir. She's
Okay.
in.
Okay, no problem. So you are there from QNX, Karnataka, no problem. So I think we can end our class today a little earlier anyway. I think it was a good discussion around multiple such topics, etc. And we'll see in the next class as to what we can discuss further more. Right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.